Even though our nation was a victor in the Great War, with the British being forced to grant concessions in the form of Indian territories, things are not well in Afghanistan. Our monarch Habibullah Khan has to walk a tightrope between everyone that is unhappy with the current state of affairs. And that is basically everyone, even his own family. Because there is a lot to be angry about. Bandits are widespread and our outdated tribal army has a hard time to deal with them. Tribalism is also not only an issue in the army, but also in our society as a whole, since this unity between the tribes are largely hurting the rule of our central government. Then there is of course a large amount of corruption that is being swept under the rug, greatly hurting our economy. The last unpopular thing is that the German military expedition to our nation, which should have ended a long time ago, is still ongoing, meaning that more and more people see our emir as a German puppet. All these issues have left our old emir desperate to find anything that could keep him in power. And the only thing that he found was to start another war, a war against our Indian rival. After preparing for a month, it was declared, starting the 4th Anglo-Afghan War. And we had mobilized everything we could because we must achieve total victory to secure not only our nation but also the throne of our emir. Immediately after it started, we rallied the nationalists and raised the banners to ensure total war support. Then we requested guns from our two friends, the Ottomans and the Germans, who were both willing to provide us with material support. With the Indian army not expecting this war, we could start an offensive without even having to start any battles. We simply marched south into Balochistan and Sindhi until we reached the Arabian Sea and encircled one division. Unfortunately, we weren't able to destroy it, and neither did we capture Karachi. This allowed the Indian army, which had now fully mobilized, to start a counterattack. The battles that followed were harsh and many of our soldiers fell to their army. However, we did hold them off for now at least, but to ensure that it would be like this until we are ready to launch our next offensive, we did several things. One of the most effective was to send in partisans of a provisional government in Kabul to destabilize the colonial government from the inside. We would also request more support from our allies, and both agreed. The Germans sent us 4 volunteer forces and 50 old fighter aircrafts. The Ottomans also sent us volunteers, but instead of fighters they endorsed our war and declared it a jihad, giving us several bonuses. Once the volunteers arrived, we immediately joined their offensives, with the first being in the north. Even though the battle was looking bright, it still took time to push back their forces. However, things were much faster in the south. Here the Germans had helped us to destroy the encircled division and also broken the Indian defense north of Karachi, allowing us to march south without resistance, until we once again met the Arabian Sea and created a second pocket. This time it was far bigger, with the city of Karachi and 6 divisions isolated by land from the rest of the Dominion. However, the Germans, who were stressed due to economic issues at home, didn't try to destroy the encirclement. Instead, they immediately continued with the next offensive. Seeing a grand opportunity, we helped them out, and once again they broke through. We met no defense in depth, allowing us to this time march all the way to Delhi, the capital of the Dominion of Delhi. And with it captured, the leadership of Delhi surrendered, and we put forward our demands, who they immediately agreed. It was the complete transfer of all of Pakistan, giving us a coastline. This shot the popularity of our emir to heights never seen, as the golden age of Afghanistan now begins. And to ride the waves of his new popularity, we held a great victory parade where, to everyone's surprise, he announced the formation of a new Barakazai empire. After this parade, our emir went on a hunting trip to celebrate, but we all know what happens then: death. At the height of his power and popularity, Habibullah Khan was killed in a hunting accident. What followed was a hectic power struggle between different men on who should be his successor. Nasrullah Khan, the designated heir, got heavily attacked from Amanullah, far more liberal as opposed to Nasrullah's conservatism. And after a little more than a week, Amanullah would launch a coup with the support from the young Afghan group in the army. However, with Nasrullah having far more support in the army, the coup failed miserably, and Nasrullah successfully consolidated his rule, even being able to ride the wave of popularity that the old emir had started. And so, after being crowned, he will start his work of returning Afghanistan to tradition, because for as long as it remains in the good grace of faith and tradition, our nation will be protected. With him being conservative, he could quickly bring down tribal disunity, since a big part of why they are unhappy was due to the anger of Habibullah's reforms. However, to fix the rest of what feels like 1,000 issues, the unity as a whole in our empire needs to be fixed. So he put in all available military forces to deal with the rebels. And with the offensive being incredibly successful, he expanded it to encompass the bandits as well, which were made significantly weaker. And now the changes back to tradition that Nasrullah seeks to implement quickly picked up speed. We rapidly reversed secularization to bring religion back to its previous strength, and to keep the country stable we made sure the press firmly stayed on our side. Returning to more military matters, the previously reformist officers have been forced to switch sides as Amanullah went into hiding, so the army now stands united behind the first chief in command. This allowed us to crush the few remaining young Afghan loyalists and throw them all in jail. And this leaves two issues for our stability left: the German expedition and the last bandits. The Germans could easily be thinned out by simply asking the Kaiser to do so, and the last bandits agreed to leave our country and join the Mujahideen in Turkestan instead. And so Nasrullah has gotten the title of the second Iron Emir, following his father and his harsh totalitarian rule that ensured peace and work determination in the nation. And this means we can finally focus on our military, economy and religion, all areas that need severe change. The biggest problem of them all is the corruption killing our economy, but by strengthening Islam we will hopefully be able to crush it. And we will start by emulating an ancient Mughal emperor who greatly improved the spiritual health of his people. He also kickstarted the Mughal economy, and we will follow his footsteps by harnessing the resources of Afghanistan to restore our previous glory. Then the most controversial law was passed, at least for the few remaining liberals. Sharia law was imposed across Afghanistan. All these reforms have greatly reduced corruption, as money isn't as important anymore. Instead, faith is starting to take its place. This has allowed us to begin rebuilding the Afghan army, because after the war it has been left in a horrible state. And with this new focus, the debate about the tribal versus a Western army has sprung up. After some debates, Nasrullah intervened and affirmed that we must continue like it is today and only renew the system, not change it. We will keep our cavalry legacy and continue to use the terrain of our land and others to our advantage. But before all these renewals were implemented, Nasrullah returned our focus to religion and corruption. He had already made several changes to facilitate the spread of Islam and our culture to our new lands, where we had also used a lot of money that we have saved by cutting down on the richest to establish the Afghan Prosperity Fund. It, for example, constructed new mosques, but most of it went to use in integrating the Pakistani territories through several investments. Then we received horrible news from our Ottoman ally. With them having failed to achieve a victory against the Bulgarians, the Middle Eastern enemies of the empire saw their chance and declared war. And so our friend found themselves in a two-front war with Egypt in the west and Iran in the east, with a bunch of rebellions everywhere else. However, this tragedy for our ally poses an opportunity for us, because soon the Ottomans invited us to declare war on Iran to expand our empire and secure the Muslim faith in a country full of socialists. With Nasrullah seeing this as an opportunity to bring the same glory to him as for the previous emir, our troops were stationed against the oblivious Iranian army and we declared war.
أفغانستان ولا عجب أن يأخذ بيمينك ربي أن يرفع مقدارك ربي وجهاد حماتك يستجب أفغانستان ولا عجب أن يأخذ بيمينك ربي أن يرفع مقدارك ربي وجهاد حماتك يستجب أفغانستان 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 أرض الإيمان ويا أملا للنور أضاء وللبشرى أنجبت حماة للدين ودقرت الباطل والكفر أرض الإيمان ويا
It took less than half a year for our armies to march through Iran and almost single-handedly destroy their whole state. In most of their lands, military occupation was established, with work having already started to integrate the territories into our empire. And this hasn't only been a victory for us, but the Ottoman Empire now looks far more stable, with them even being able to push the Bulgarians to Varna. In addition, Nasrullah has become even more popular than the old emir ever was, and a new golden age of Islam has been ushered in. Corruption is non-existent, our economy is booming, and our focus on a tribal army has shown that it was well worth it. But we aren't done. The British and other Indian factions still threaten our rule, and our Mughal ambitions, which our old emir put forwards, have not been achieved. However, despite everything being so great, we need to prepare a lot and wait for resistance in Iran to calm down, before we can actually act on our ambitions. To set the stage for our preparations, a second group of Sharia laws were implemented, helping both our army, economy and resistance suppression. But most importantly, it allowed us to reform our taxes, since Afghanistan is the country where it is the hardest to collect. Of course, it was somewhat unpopular, but it will help so much more. So, with the economy now prepared, we can turn towards our army, which has already been expanding with additional divisions being deployed after the Iranian war. But if we want to continue this trend, we need two things: more men and more equipment. Because all Indian states currently outnumber us in both categories. Thus, we implemented the 8-person conscription plan, where every 8 men will serve in the army. And then we started building the war machine, constructing several military factories. However, we don't need to surpass the Indians, because we have an additional way of acquiring equipment, straight from our enemies. We then put our generals to work on studying our 2 previous wars to find our enemies' weaknesses and our strengths. But we also found a weakness in ourselves, our outdated equipment. So despite our focus on tribal warfare, Nasrullah immediately put in significant amount of resources into research, so that we can modernize our equipment. And so, with our technology rapidly advancing and our army now 45,000 men strong, which should definitely be enough, we stand ready. Nasrullah declared a new Hindustani empire and announced for our armed forces that in 25 days they should cross the border with the dominion of Delhi. Our generals drew up war plans in the meantime, and they were formed around the assumption that due to the global war, most Indian forces will be elsewhere. So if we capture Ahmedabad, they will have no way to return home, and neither will their Entente allies be able to reinforce. Therefore, the biggest of our force concentrations were in Karachi. However, we also had a substantial amount in Delhi to put pressure elsewhere as well. The 25 days had now gone by, and our army, just like planned, crossed the border. Our cavalry in Karachi were the first to launch the attack. In less than a week, we also arrived to Ahmedabad, where its garrisons were rapidly defeated and the port captured. So, with the first objective achieved, we started the Delhi offensive, where the Indian army had now started setting up defenses. Fortunately, they were no match for our infantry, supported by cavalry, and we once again arrived outside of Delhi. This time, however, it was much harder to enter, and more than 1,000 of our soldiers paid with their lives. But we would soon get revenge, because with the city and its supply hub captured, we could turn south, where the first major encirclement of the war was staged. 7 whole divisions were destroyed. But before we could utilize this victory, we received urgent news from our occupation in Iran. It had in fact gotten invaded by the Assyrians and the French expedition landing in Fars. So we quickly halted our offensives in India and sent a major force to the west. Once we arrived, we realized that we might have over-exaggerated. The French expedition was a single division, and the Assyrians were already far too overstretched for their own good. Thus, a simple march along the Persian Gulf was enough for us to eventually reach Basra and Kuwait, forcing the Assyrians to surrender. Quickly returning to India, we staged the second offensive in the Delhi area, and this one was even more successful, as after we broke through we met no resistance, allowing us to split the dominion of Delhi in 2. We decided to first deal with the south, as this was where the most divisions were present, and this made the battles difficult. It probably took more than 3 months before we reached Indore, the last supply hub in the area. But once it was captured and the Indian forces started taking massive amount of attrition damage, all of them were easily dealt with, leaving only the north and Nepal left. Fortunately, there were far fewer soldiers here, so we could easily cross the river and arrive to Lucknow, making the Delhi administration once again surrender. We would continue into Nepal, but before we could capture their capital, we received a letter from the Entente leadership. They asked for peace since they rather focus on the European theater than staging a costly reconquest of India. Seeing how we didn't plan to attack them anymore either, we signed a peace treaty with them, granting us all our conquered territories in Nepal. But we aren't done yet. Huberdad and the Bharatiya commune are still left to be defeated. So after 25 days, we declared war on both. With the Syndicalists being the weakest, we focused our offensive efforts against them. Surprisingly, we broke through almost immediately, probably since they had prepared against the war with the British, not our cavalry. So we had soon reached the Bay of Bengal after capturing Dhaka, splitting the east of their country from their main forces. Despite the mountainous terrain here, all garrisons were swiftly crushed and we could turn to the west to destroy the Syndicalists. Surprisingly, they had reinforced Calcutta with as many divisions as possible, but it was still not enough, as after an almost all-out attack towards the city we entered it, not only capturing their capital but also encircling a bunch of divisions, which left the west of Calcutta undefended. After utilizing this opening to the fullest, the Bharatiya government realized it was over for them and capitulated, leaving Huberdad all alone. Since they weren't prepared at all for the commune to capitulate, the front in the east was incredibly exposed. However, despite us attacking from the small front we had to keep their troops there, they successfully reinforced the other front and kept us out of Hyderabad. But they had overreacted and now broke through in our original front, reaching Bombay and opening an even larger, undefended front line. So the next few days they were completely outmaneuvered, as Hyderabad was captured from the west instead and the south was left almost undefended. They tried a last stand in Mysore, but it was already over for them and we finally defeated the last Indian state. And so Nasrullah declared the Mughal Empire restored, stretching from Khuzestan to East Bengal. And with this announcement, the long work begins to spread Islam to our new lands and integrate them fully into our new massive empire. But whatever happens, Nasrullah will be remembered as the emir who brought Afghanistan to light and created a new golden age of Islam. So thanks so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video despite it being a bit shorter, and see you in the next one.